have to hit record.
Are you recording?
Yeah.
Okay, so no, you don't
You can
also.
delete this portion, I guess.
Yeah, I probably will. Whatever. All
Yeah.
right. This is Printed and Pressed. I'm Chris,
And I'm Andrew.
and I'm in Will's library today, which is why I'm in a different background.
He's
Um,
hiding in a different dungeon.
yeah, exactly. And I'm on a different recording setup just because of the timing and everything else going on. So this is a pre-record because of reasons. And so if you're watching this, this is not live. But depending on when we premiere this, we may be in the chat, we may not be. I don't know yet. What book are we covering today?
We are covering The Truth and Beauty by
Hold up, did
Andrew.
you actually buy it?
Yes, I did.
Oh man, I bet you regret that purchase. Anyways,
Well, yes and no. It's a book, and as a result, you gotta appreciate it all the same. So,
yep, got to appreciate it all the same. Not it's a different book.
no, it's. I prefer reading a physical book normally.
I
Um,
mean, I do too, but I only
it
buy
wasn't that
physical books.
expensive when I bought it.
I mean, if I'm gonna read a book that I care about, yeah, I'm definitely buying a hardcover. I'm definitely buying a
It
physical.
was a cheap book when I bought it, Chris. Okay,
It was
it's fair.
like $3, which is about all it's worth. Anyways, so who? It's by Andrew Klavan.
Andrew Klavan.
And what do we know about Andrew Klavan?
He works at the Daily Wire.
And actually, at the time we were reading this, the Daily Wire still had a few extra
Credibility.
employees, a few more employees than they do now.
Well, it also had more credibility prior to a bunch of things. Let's leave it at that. All right. So, actually, screw it. We will probably discuss some of the statements he has made just because I think this book does make it obvious why he has that standpoint. I mean, that
I would
viewpoint
tend
in
to
general.
agree.
Yeah. So, oh, we lost your video for a second.
No, I just killed it to bring me back in line with you.
Ah,
I was delayed.
yeah, your terrible internet problems tonight. So, where do we want to begin, Chris? Do we want to just
Well, we should
summarize this
describe that. We
book?
should summarize the book. I'll let you
So,
start, but I have a
well,
very. Go ahead.
I'll say this. This book was marketed in a way that I feel like is a little disingenuous about what the overall subject matter is.
For
Because
a
I
lot.
do, yeah, because I think the way it's marketed is only for like a third of the book. I would argue.
I would say the way that this book is advertised is almost 100% dishonest because I thought it was going to be a book about English literature and Andrew Klavan weaving Christianity into it.
It's way more about his own personal views than talking about the English literature.
That's what I was expecting it to be, was English literature, but it's more
Yeah.
of like a Andrew Klavan's weird take on Christianity and conversion story and pseudo preaching to you, along with
You're
his
not wrong
discovery
in
of.
that statement, but there is like a singular part of this book that is still technically discussing it. The literature, I guess.
The literature, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, okay. This book is split into 3 parts, so we'll just go through it as a summary. You have part 1, which is the problems of a godless world. So, we'll just discuss the chapter name titles, and if there's anything you remember from it specifically, because we read this a little bit a while ago.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So there's the problems of a godless world. The first chapter is the immortal evening, the spiritual hinge of history. You have Who's There, Hamlet, and the problem of unbelief. You have Unhallowed Arts, Frankenstein, and the problem of science. Terrain in Hell, Paradise Lost, and the problem of radical politics. And I'll say this, I think most of the parts that I valued in this book were this part 1.
I would have to say the bulk of things that are enjoyable in this book were in part one. I thought it was interesting. Am I delayed? I can't
A
tell.
little bit, just a little bit, not bad.
I thought it was the most interesting thing he says in here in regards to his faith in the entire book was when he's talking about how he had Protestants and Catholics together at his house describing like religion and stuff. But then I was like, he does not identify himself with either of those groups.
No, he does not.
It's like he sits outside of the debate. And I'm like, hold on a second. You're not the mediator between all the different sects of Christianity. Like, and I think that really polluted my view of any takes he makes about Christianity, because he refuses to choose. There's no higher authority for him.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say that this is where the fact that he's technically Jewish comes into play, I think. More
Culturally,
than anything.
I think he used to be religiously Jewish. Now he's just
now he's Christian, but yeah, I mean,
ethnically Jewish. I'm sorry,
now he's Christian, but I feel like I can't judge what's in his own heart, right? But the language he uses does not seem to deify Jesus very much.
It almost seems like he sits in a weird spot between Christianity and Judaism.
Yeah. No,
he may view Jesus as his savior, but he has his own take on everything.
While he's the Son of God and everything, according to his words in this book and all that, he still views Jesus very human.
Yeah, and
not necessarily flawless.
Yeah,
right?
I think part of the problem is he doesn't claim membership to any particular version of Christianity. He's got like his own thing going on.
I mean, the Bible.
Yeah,
but even then, he doesn't really seem to go with the Bible either.
Like I said, it seems like he just kind of has his own take on everything.
Yeah. So the next part, because I think we can circle back after we go through like what the sections are.
I would say his discussion of English literature in this book was very good. I liked his discussion on Frankenstein. I liked his discussion on Paradise Lost. I liked his pointing to the Christian values in literature, historically speaking, and how they're kind of lacking in today's literature.
Right. So
I liked a lot of that.
Yeah, and I want to touch on those subjects again, but let's just go through let's
sure.
What happens.
Go heading by heading, and yeah, you're the leader.
Well, because I don't really see the value of breaking down each chapter like we have in the past with certain books, because
this isn't that kind of book.
It's not. It really blends together. It's more of a what stood out to you type of discussion, you know. Part 2 is the journey toward solutions, and that is 2 chapters. You have the gate to the garden, lyrical ballads, and the reconstruction of the soul. And then you have the songs of spring, Keats' odes, and reconstructing eternity. And then part 3 is reconstructing Jesus, a romantic meditation on the Gospels, the world made flesh, Jesus versus unbelief, born of a virgin, Jesus, humanity, and the eternal feminine. Believe the works, Jesus versus scientific materialism, the kingdom of heaven, Jesus versus radical politics, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus and the soul, the end, Jesus and eternity. And then there's an epilogue, which is the road to Emmaus, everything becomes literature. So, yeah, I mean, basically the reconstructing Jesus thing, that whole part, he's really just describing Jesus as like a human, trying to relate to Jesus more in a sense where he's almost making Jesus come off more flawed, I think.
His take is odd here because he views becoming Christian as getting to know Jesus directly, as if you're not looking at the same
Buddy.
scriptures. Yeah, it's like he's taking this personal relationship with Jesus thing to the next level in a
He's
weird
not really
way.
viewing him as like the Father. What, Chris?
What? He's not really viewing him as the
Well, like
Father?
there's the like God and all of that. You know what I'm saying? Like he's
You mean
viewing
his
he's not
he's
viewing him
looking at
as the
his
Trinity. He's not viewing him as the Trinity, is what I'm saying. Oh.
You're saying he's viewing him as a holy man, but not wholly divine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And basically what we're looking at is his snapshot of that.
Yeah. Because he kind of separates him out, makes him a prophet, not a.
I'm gonna cut this little section out. I just figured out what's killing my internet. 1 second.
Okay.
I've got something that decided to sync after I told it not to.
Ah.
Oh my gosh, it is literally just stalling my whole computer.
See, because I stopped taking notes after the part 1.
Is that how bad it was?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Stop the syncing.
We'll do a countdown when you're back. So
I'm gonna pause it for 8 hours. Man, OneDrive just wrecks my internet connection.
Mm.
All right, I'm gonna reload the camera one more time. See if this fixes things.
Okay.
Oh, there's an actual. Okay, that's cool. All right, I'm gonna check my internet real quick. See which one I'm connected to. Oh, the 5G. That might be my problem too. All right, let's see. How are we doing? Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Countdown.
3, 2, 1. Unpause.
Yes. So what I was saying earlier, Chris, is just like he's not really viewing him as much more than a prophet. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, he's
a prophet.
putting him. He's taking the holy man aspect of Jesus from the Christian Gospels as the only side of him he relates to.
Mm-hmm.
He's relating to the man and what he did and the experiences of the man,
And
kind
then
of ignoring the deity, the divine.
Yeah. It's a different take. I'll say that much. I'll be honest, as a Christian, it's not necessarily a thing I've ever really thought was important. The perspective he's trying to take on it, I don't think was ever really important. At least not for trying to overly relate to Jesus.
I would never say that it is important that we get to know the carpenter as opposed to the whole body of his work.
Right. That's my point. Like, I've never really thought of that portion being particularly necessary.
I think everything, the thing is, he's trying to see something that's not on the page. And while I think that's fine, there's definitely like mysticism, especially in various churches, and that's fine, whatever. You don't, his take is so out there as far as theology goes. And I can't tell you any particular group that would embrace these ideas other than maybe somebody in his exact same situation.
I would say that it would be his social circle, and
because he's not. he's not a theologian. You know, he's not like somebody who's deeply studying scripture in that way.
No, but I think he hits enough notes for people who like to circle jerk theoretically about that certain topics. What? It's true. Come on.
Just the deep discussion here with the word circle jerk throwing in there, you know.
Some people like to do that. You won't like this, but sometimes I think Catholics do it a little bit too much with early church fathers. So
Well, the early church establishes a lot of things.
I'm just saying when people try to like go down roads that aren't actually that important just to have extra knowledge, it's sometimes it's a little bit of like I know more than you type. It's almost there's a different type of pride, you know. It's like when you have the people who are like I'm more humble than you type of pride, where it's still pride, just taking on a different form. Then
if the goal is to one up other people, then yes, it is pride.
Yeah.
If the goal is to educate, inform, or build your faith, then that's different.
Yeah, no. I'm just saying that it's one of those things where it comes off that way sometimes. But
I would
depending on the person.
Almost be willing to argue that this book by Andrew Klavan strives to sound humble, but comes across a bit egotistical.
It came arrogant. It did come off arrogant.
And that really kind of turned me
on.
on.
To agree. Okay, so going back to the part that actually had value, which was part 1. I'll say this. In this book, he had that whole phase where he's talking about the little grouping of writers and their whole existence, which was a bit
like the Keats tedious. And Mary Shelley and all that.
Yeah, their whole relationships.
Because I did really like his discussion on Mary Shelley and like how she captures a lot of culture without intending to.
Yeah. I like the discussion about their works more than the discussion about them as people.
Oh yeah, I could care less about what they did as opposed to what they wrote down. Because the lasting aspect of their work is what they wrote down.
Right. Within that section though, I thought there's a couple things that were very good topics. One was he made a very valid point about how the value of women and children has been reduced.
It absolutely in society. Has, I would agree.
So like, so you have where women and children were previously considered extremely valuable for the production of specific goods prior to industrialization. So like, just look at Proverbs 31, the whole expectation of what a good wife is type of thing. Most of those roles have been taken away from women. So even the concept of like the trad wife stays at home type of thing is kind of bollocks. You know, it's not real. The concept of a modern stay at home wife is not the same. It's not the same.
I'm confused where you're going with this now.
No, I'm just saying like a lot of people are talking about how the traditional thing has been lost, but like even the concept of what a traditional housewife, so to speak, a wife in general is not even long-lasting tradition. It's a very short period of time in human existence.
When you say stay-at-home trad wife,
yeah, you know, the whole trad wife trend on the internet now, Chris, the stay-at-home mom thing.
I'm not sure I understand how this ties into your conversation here.
Because it's right now where it's like women and children. Literally, he makes a valid point when you look at Proverbs 31, like the concept of a wife being what we define as the role of a stay-at-home wife now is like the modern take of a stay-at-home wife, where it's a role that's greatly reduced even compared to like what is actually the traditional role.
Are you saying that the roles and responsibilities of the wife at home were larger than they are
They were
now.
larger back in the day, way
I
larger.
think it really depends on what your expectations in your marriage are, because I would argue that although the trad wife on TikTok seems to be a reduced role, the trad wives that I know in real life actually do a lot of the things that your older school families
Okay,
did.
I'm talking about the thing that's being glorified on social media.
Okay. If we're sticking to that category, I would agree there's a lot of like grifting going on with the trad wife online,
Tons of grifting. Also,
because they're
though, I don't
probably
think
not.
there's anything wrong when you look at that. Though there's nothing wrong with the two working parents. There really isn't. I think though the thing that's been lost is that um, there used to be a like the family worked together more. The
I
family as
don't
a single unit has been broken up a bit more.
I don't think the issue is from both parents doing tasks for the family. I think the issue stems from, and this is a post industrialization culture,
Yeah,
is that you wind up with both, well, not both, you wind up with one spouse or both spouse working, and the kids don't see the work you do because you're
yeah,
not doing your work at home, you're doing work somewhere else.
yeah.
And that
Oh,
is a
I
modern
concur.
invention. What used to happen was you'd have like the family farm or the family shop or the family business,
Whatever the
and
trade was.
the kids would see the parents both performing tasks for that, and usually the women
Oh,
would do
it's
like
more than
accounting
that,
or
Chris.
things like that,
It's more than that. The
and the
kids
business
would
was home and the kids would
learn how to
help.
work it too.
Exactly. So like if your dad's the shoemaker, your mom might be handling the paperwork, she might be handling like tanning the leather, and then the dad might be sewing it all into the shoe. I don't know, there's a lot of aspects to shoemaking. I don't know a whole lot about it at this point because I
There are a lot of aspects, yes, Chris.
we're so far removed from that at this point, but everybody did a role.
Hmm.
It wasn't
But I
just mom and
mean,
dad.
but what I'm trying to say is when you think about it, the concept of a family working together has been changed, I think, for the negative.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think so. That's why it's important as a family that you do things together as a family. And I don't know that Klavan really captures this idea well.
He doesn't capture it well, except for the fact that
He calls it out.
he calls out the fact that the value of women and children was greatly reduced.
I
And
would agree
that's
with that.
from that point on, in a sense, with industrialization. The
On a
whole
side note,
thing.
then, one of the things you can do, and this is just me offering advice as
Mm,
a family man, is to do activities that involve work as a family, like
yeah.
cleaning up the yard in the springtime, doing a garden, raising animals, buying
Hmm.
something that the family can all do and all take part in. And
It
do it
can't only
together. Make an
be fun
effort to do it
things.
together.
It can't. Yeah, it can't just be fun activities. I think because
It has to be
oh
work.
yeah, there has to be a work element because of the simple fact that I think that's a huge proponent to why so many young people are not maturing in their 20s.
That
They have
absolutely is a
not
part of it.
they have not had that work aspect from a young enough age, that responsibility. That's my opinion. There was another one where Burke's understanding of tradition predicted the outcomes of both revolutions. So like the French and the American Revolution. The flaw of radicalism is seeking to overturn the very traditions that created their values. So when you are trying to just overthrow the traditions, you because you have your current modern day values, you're not going to keep those values for very long because you've destroyed everything that has created them, that has established them as values. And I think we see that today. I think that's something that we see very often today. No one values the actual traditions that caused us to have the values that we have today. At least not in the modern political debate.
So I find it odd that with all the things we know about Mr. Klavan, that he's posting a picture
What does he put?
With text that's overlaid over a crusader from Christendom. And I'm just like, hold on a second, what? Anyway, I was trying to find some
something
tweets.
New on Twitter. Okay.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I'm just like, oh my, this is something.
Yeah,
this is
but you get what I'm saying, though, right, Chris?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I think he has the problem is he's got a lot of good points layered in a book.
Oh yeah, no,
Has
I'm just
almost
drawing
no
attention to the
aim.
good points.
He's got
So
almost
if
no
someone,
aim. No aim at
yeah,
all for
no,
this.
if someone wants to just not read the book and just get the good points, this is the part where that's what we're doing right now, Chris.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's the goal right now, this portion of the review.
And his discussion on Frankenstein was so interesting to me because a lot of people do just go right to, what is it, Frankenstein's Bride?
Yeah.
The Bride of Frankenstein and the movies. Whereas it seems like and because of the historicity of those movies versus the historicity of that book, it almost captures an entirely different theme, which is funny. And this is a discussion he has in the book that I don't know if he meant to or not, but it's funny how the same story can be told at different times in history and people will get entirely different meanings out of it, especially when it comes to Paradise Lost.
In fairness, though, they make changes for the film.
No, I'm not even talking about the film at this point. I'm saying like when he discusses Paradise Lost, and it was clear to everybody living at the time it was written in that the devil was the bad guy, and then people reading it and writing college essays on it in modern times thinks the devil's the good guy. It's like it's crazy how the intent of a story, or let me rephrase that, the external expectations or understanding of a story can change as time goes on and leave the intentions of the story behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's about perspective. Just like if you choose to have a certain lens on how you view the world, you're going to respond very differently to the same events as someone who chose a different lens.
Like if you're wearing rose-tinted glasses, looking back.
Not even about that. Like if you just have the perspective that things aren't going to be perfect, and it doesn't ruin your day if something doesn't go as planned, right?
Oh
if
yeah,
someone else
best laid plans, right?
Yeah. So if someone else has it where everything's reliant on that plan or it's garbage, you're going to respond very differently. No, there was another one where he talks about the paradox of virtue. A society must be virtuous to be free, but it must be free before it can be virtuous because it is not virtue unless freely chosen.
That's like the shopping cart dilemma. There is no there's no one forcing you to do the right thing, period. But the right thing is to put the shopping cart back. Whereas the virtue of the society with no virtue would be a society where if you don't put the shopping cart back, you get shot or put in jail. Like then it takes away. Right?
Chris, it's the Bible in a nutshell, because not once in the Bible does God actually want to compel someone to believe.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at in a much simpler version of.
Yeah, but I'm just going to say it explicitly. It's like in the Bible multiple times, he refuses to compel people to believe. It has to be a choice to believe.
Well, yeah, one of the major staples of Christianity is free will.
Yeah.
Always has been, always will be.
But going off of that, there's the point where change should grow organically from the culture, because the culture created the values that demanded the change. And I think we see that as a huge problem today.
Yeah.
As a society, we are extremely impatient, so freaking impatient that we can't just change the law that's been the barrier and then let it take time to change with the culture. As a society, we have people who demand change overnight as though it can just snap your fingers as if you are God and change all the past. They don't act as though it's going to take time. And because of that, they make us perpetrate new wrongs, new errors that make things worse
Well, I
and
mean,
build
this
resentment.
this may not be the best example what you're talking about, but this is what I thought of when you said that. Is
Mm,
that you get like a policy change on YouTube, and all of a
mm,
sudden they go after old content
yeah.
as if it was
Hmm.
put out under the same policy. And that's just the opposite of what the expectation should be. You shouldn't put out a new law to curb something that already happened.
Well, not just that. Well, grandfather clauses are typical, but
Right. And they're not in YouTube though. There's no
they're not on
grandfather
YouTube because
clause.
YouTube
No.
is tyrannical. But um, it's true.
YouTube is tyrannical. Yeah, pretty
It
much.
is. But I was more so saying that all the talk about representation.
I'm almost putting out. I guess maybe I wasn't clear, Andrew, because I was trying to respond to what you said. It's almost like we expect that with the advent of something new, even the things that already happened will have changed, and the impatience
Yeah,
is that change takes time,
yeah,
and you can't change the past, which is what
exactly.
people almost want to do.
Yeah, and I mean, even it goes beyond that though, because even with the example you've chosen, there is the expectation that it should change overnight
Mm-hmm.
going forward, right? You can have that. But there's certain things where it takes time for the change to take effect. You can't, when something is decades long as far as the process to get somewhere, right? And you've now removed the barrier that was preventing people from getting to that stage, that position, it's going to take another decade before you can see change because you have to go through the full life cycle of the process before it can change.
Oh, this book almost ignores the cultural cyclization that you see in like um, the fourth turning, where
Mhm.
like a generation basically has to die off, the generation that set the culture before the culture can change.
Well, I mean, that's the point he's trying to get to without
But he doesn't make it
realizing.
very well.
No, he doesn't make it very well. I don't know if he's ever read the book or not, but
Probably not.
that's the type of point that he's making, where it's like you have to have the patience to let it go for like a whole generation before you say a policy didn't work
Right.
at making implementing change when it's like a long-term process. You can't say there's been no progress unless you've allowed it to go a full generation and you have not seen change.
Any policy that comes out now, it'll take 4 generations to see the final fruits of it.
Yeah,
And
true.
4 generations for uh
And that's for
generations like
social policy, though. That's for social policy, not necessarily certain ones that you can tell they're garbage right off the bat, like a new financial related one.
here's a Catholic example
Financial
for you. Here's a Catholic example for you of this.
okay.
We are right now finally seeing the final fruits of Vatican II as the generation that created it are dying off.
Yeah, no, that would you would be seeing the people whose whole worldview is based on it entirely without the perspective of before. Now they're getting into leadership. So yeah.
Like for example, the two popes that existed before Pope Francis, they would have been pre-Vatican II in their formation.
Mm-hmm.
Pope Francis is Vatican II formation.
Yeah. No,
So
that's a good point. Um, he talks about how Cromwell was basically the English version of the French Revolution. Not
yeah,
100% on
I
there.
would
So
I would kind of agree with that.
yeah, and then uh, he makes a point in this section about how we have moved from a religion of the gaps to a science of the gaps.
A religion of the gaps to a science of the
Yeah, so like
gaps.
religion explains the unexplained, and now we've
Oh
changed
yeah.
it to be where we don't understand something and then we hand wave science. So we don't understand the Big Bang. So we hand wave science instead of saying that God,
Science.
yeah. Um, this is basically this last one that I took a note on goes into something you already talked about, but like the paradise lost. So this story of Adam and Eve, radicals transgress paradox of virtue, claim knowledge of good and evil for themselves, strip the power to freely choose virtue from others, transforming imagined paradise into hell. That's the cycle he basically has there.
I would say this book made me want to read Paradise Lost.
Yeah. No, if the book did anything, it made Paradise Lost sound interesting.
Paradise Lost and a couple other, like I've never read Frankenstein either.
But it's like, yeah, so it goes into the whole thing where it's like you try to get rid of you transgress that whole paradox of virtue. That's
Absolutely.
how you create hell.
I actually the
And
thing
that's
I got
almost
out of
every
Paradise
revolution.
the thing I got out of Paradise Lost though more so than that was in his discussion of it is how generations will look at the same story differently. And we kind of already went into that, but
Yeah. I mean, that part was interesting, but it was I'm trying to think of the way to describe it.
I almost
It's a
wish that he
perspective.
didn't
It's a
try to
really shit.
smash. I almost wish he didn't try to smash his English historical walkthrough with his theology in this book.
Yeah, he could have done a lot more with just part one, I feel like. And
If
for
you
some
take,
reason,
go
he
ahead.
really wanted to reconstruct Jesus using the perspective of these. And I don't think it was necessary.
I don't think it worked.
Well,
I
that's
just don't think it worked
besides the
well.
point. I think it's more so of how, if he had simply just left it abstract in how the stories recreated the virtues of the Bible, it would have been a better book.
Yeah, probably.
But instead, he wants to recreate Jesus in a way to different perspective to understand. It didn't work. I'll concur with that.
I will say by the end of it, unless you agree with him, you're gonna feel very what was outside looking in with his descriptions towards the end. I remember he had gone so far off the page of what I believe that by the end of it, I just couldn't even relate to what he was writing
Well,
down.
okay. All right. One second.
Go ahead.
I'll say this. I'll say that he 100% is going to offend Catholics with his take because of the
His
his
discussion of Mary is
yeah,
absolutely antithetical to Catholicism.
yeah. And so let's just table that, Chris. I knew the second I
I
read
did.
it, I knew you were
I
going to be
didn't.
upset.
I wasn't bringing that up. I was saying though
No,
that
but that's the reason you felt like outside looking in because you're going to completely disagree with the second it takes a certain look at it.
I wasn't even going to bring
Um,
that up. I was just going to say like
I was
if your
explaining to the
views.
viewer. I know you,
Okay, go ahead.
Chris. I was
I'm just
explaining to
saying
the
that if you
viewer.
have a different set of values than he does, regardless of if it's Catholicism or something else, if there's something in there you disagree with, by the end of it, you're gonna find yourself like kind of on the outside looking in with his discussion by the end of it.
I'll be honest, Chris. Even as a Protestant, it gives the same vibe.
That's what I'm
Like,
saying. That
yeah, even as a Protestant, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is interesting perspective to try to take. It's interesting. It isn't something that I think is useful or necessary for one's faith to take that perspective, or do you look at it this
that's
way?
what
And it's a
I'm
bit.
You're trying to put me in the Catholic corner here, and I'm saying everybody, anybody, period, who
Yeah.
doesn't have the same worldview as Andrew Klavan is going to find themselves on the outside looking in.
What I'm
Period.
trying to say is that someone could try to dismiss your take because they know you're a Catholic who's very uppity every time someone takes a different view on.
Okay, look, do I like his discussion of Mary? No, I think his discussion of Mary is terrible. I even think that, I think even for a Protestant view, his discussion on Mary is freaking weird. But
No, I was going to say that I think that he takes some leaps. All right, that's all I'm saying.
very
Like
big leaps on that one.
he takes some leaps. I feel like he wants to make Jesus too familiar to his own experience. And I feel like the only way someone could feel this way is if their upbringing was Judaism, where they don't view Jesus as special at all. Like that's the hot take that I have on this, is that you can tell 100% that his upbringing is not Christian because of how much he familiarizes Jesus as if
he's probably more aligned with Messianic Judaism than he is with Christianity.
Yeah, because Messianic has a weird take on Jesus's divinity as well.
And I think he falls into that category on accident. I don't think he does it on purpose. I think that just because if you're raised in that religion, they have a specific view of the Messiah, and so you have to almost do what he does to get to Christianity from Judaism.
I mean, this is one of the first divides in the church to begin with.
Right, exactly.
It's one of the earliest divides because there's the one where Jesus was man and God at the same time. And then there's
either Arianism or Nestorianism, or those might be two sides of the same coin.
There's a different title, I think. I forget what one it is.
Arianism believes that Jesus was only divine.
There was another one. It's I can't think of the name. But
Nestorian had to do with Mary, Mother of God stuff. Okay, no, that's
there was another one that talked about him having two separate, instead of being singularly divine and man at the same time. No, it starts with a D. It's like a
Donatism.
Something
like that. No, that's not Donatism. That's something else.
I forget what it's called. And we're not going to find it in this moment. But
dispensationalism. No, I'm just kidding. That's the rapture.
But no, it's one of those things where they view it as he's two separate. And,
separate entities. Sure.
Yeah. He's not man and divine at the same time. The Trinity isn't a thing, really, in that viewpoint, I don't think either. So it's an odd take that I think honestly, as a Protestant, even I felt uncomfortable at times with some of the leaps he was taking. So it's not just Catholics who might find the third portion a bit weird.
I even think that the fact that he says, I've had conversations with Catholics and Protestants, and does not place himself in either of those worldviews as far as religion goes, tells me he feels like his worldview of Christianity is outside of those two groups.
It is outside, because I mean, okay,
and maybe that wasn't intentional, but that's what I got out of it.
Okay, I'll throw out the topic. Is his son not homosexual?
I have no idea.
I think he is.
I don't know. I can find out though.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's one of those things, because that's the person he references the most in this entire conversation. And if he is, I think that's like, it's telling that he's very much taking his own.
I have no idea, to be honest with you, but he definitely does bounce things off of his son a lot.
Well, let me Google it.
If not, I'm deleting this whole section out of the video.
It's fine. I'm pretty sure he is. Yeah, he has a gay son. His son is gay, and he proclaims to have faith in Jesus Christ.
Huh.
And Klavan struggles with the idea that homosexuality is a sin.
So without knowing whether his son is in a relationship that's homosexual or not, he is okay. I don't know enough about this guy to make comments about him, but that definitely can lead. I do know from anecdotal experiences that can lead to some interesting dichotomies in your faith and what you believe. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that Klavan does have some moments where he doesn't mind making his own
concessions.
Yeah. And that's why when you feel like it's a bit uncomfortable in certain moments of like, I don't know if I'd go there with that. It's like, well, that's Klavan, right? He has no problem doing that. So it's not like he's a person I would say theological advice is a thing to necessarily take from him in that moment, right? His discussion on literature, though, and the
I think he's really intelligent with
is
literature.
Very good, but yeah.
I think his literature discussion is
the
great.
Theological portion.
If you could take this book and divorce the theology from what he's writing here, I think he's got a pretty good historical walkthrough of a lot of Christian-based texts and stuff. Yes. Or maybe not Christian-based, but like things that were
Western text, cultural text,
and the culture was Christian.
Yeah,
and that's another thing to think about. Like a Christian culture will produce things that are inherently with Christian values because that's the culture.
Yeah, I think he, like you said, if he divided this book, if he just left out the personal take on Jesus portion, and he just went down these are the principles that translate from, because we were removing God from everything, and at this time of history, and this was them like recreating those virtues in, I guess you'd say, secular text, then that would have been a far more valuable book if he had focused on the truth and beauty, as in the truth is beauty. That's kind of the point that he's trying to say. So when you're trying to create something beautiful that's art, it's objectively beautiful when it's truth based, right? When it's a undeniable fundamental principle.
When he contrasts between the beauty of Christian art and the anti-beauty of non-Christian art, I was like, okay, I can relate to that. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then I think the problem is part 3 just leaves a weird taste in everyone's mouth. You know what I'm saying, though? It does.
I would agree. The part 3 was the hardest one to step through for me.
Yeah, because it's a total tone shift. It doesn't fit with the rest of the book. It just doesn't.
It's like he was building up to this conclusion that nobody was expecting.
Yeah. And it's like he was writing 2 separate books and found a way to blend them into one to get the page count.
Yeah, I really don't know. I can tell you this. So I listened to this on Audible, or Hoopla or whatever, and he narrates it himself, and so it's very Klavan-y.
Okay.
But he is actually like, okay, so I'm gonna give him this positive. From a audiobook narrator standpoint, he's very good. Like crisp. He nails the language. You can tell he's got experience doing this. So if you want to read this book, and you're an audiobook person, if this is something that appeals to you, it's very well done.
Does it come off like a long podcast for him?
Kinda, yeah.
Okay.
But he's also just got a very good voice for that.
I'll say this. I feel like this book the early portion where he's just talking about the literature, if he just did a long form podcast about that and skipped out on the other portion, it'd be good. I mean, that's what sold me on picking the book, honestly, is that he was doing the rounds on podcasts.
I think when I was texting you while I was listening to this, like in the beginning, I was like, oh man, this is great. I'm so on board with this. And then as the further along in the book I got, the more I was like, nope, this is terrible.
Yeah. No,
Like,
I agreed with you. And when I read it, I knew immediately when you were not going to like it, because it's like,
hey, but I still got through it. And I didn't spend too
no.
much time talking about that. But
No, I know.
I think the most arrogant aspect of his discussion is when he finds his own truth about Christianity. He says it like it's a fact rather than like this is what he believes. Does that make sense? And that really irked me, because even on things that I may or may not agree with him on, if he said this is what I believe rather than this is the truth, and that's kind of the take he had, especially so like I've already pointed out.
I think it's hard not to do that though when he has the truth and beauty as the title.
Well, for example, he says, I went through and I read about this, and this is the truth. It's like, and then he states it as if it's a fact. Like he says, when he's talking about Mary, he says that, and Jesus had brothers, and da da da. It's like, okay, but that is like one of the most heavily disputed things amongst the various sects of the church, and you're saying this as if it is fact, uncontested. It's like, no, that's kind of a contested thing, a contested notion. And anybody who believes that there were no brothers of Jesus, and that's a lot of groups of people, you're going to be turned off immediately when he says that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, let's be honest, this is the same guy that tried to go along with claiming that saying Christ is king is anti-Semitic. So
it's not. Flat out, it's not.
I'm just saying, this is the same guy, Chris. So when we say that he has that different viewpoint, where he kind of sort of does not view Jesus as divine and man at the same time, it's
the only bone that I will throw him, because I'm not going to throw him a lot of bones here, is that if you go to a Ben Shapiro live stream and just start saying Christ is king, that's not going to make him convert. You're not incorrect. But I think shouting Christ is king at somebody is not going to make them convert.
No, it won't.
That's probably not a good strategy.
It won't. I mean...
Like, can you imagine somebody walking up to you with holy water, like, bah, Christian? Like, that's not going to work.
Putting a little squirt gun.
It's not going to work.
Baptized right here on the street.
You need to bring people to Christ through conviction, evangelization, and truth.
Yeah, it's about
but
it's
just
about
shouting,
living by example, not spouting.
Like, imagine like somebody running up to you and saying, maybe think of like something stupid. I don't know.
Dude,
Scientology, convert.
It's
that's not gonna work.
Street preachers that everyone hates at sporting events.
But regardless, I don't think it is anti-Semitic for somebody to do that. No, it is not anti-Semitic to shout Christ is king. It's like the one true thing about the faith that no matter who says it, I'm like, yes, I agree.
You're allowed to say it no matter who you are, Chris.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I, like no matter who says it,
it's just true. Telling someone else that you think they're wrong too.
Well, yeah. Like, how many times does somebody like Ben Shapiro say Christianity's false for this or that? He went on where was he? Was it Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
And he said that he thought that Jesus was a rabble rouser and he got executed for good reason. Like, okay, good for you, dude. Like, whatever.
Hey, man, we're supposed to believe that, he's not establishment, Chris.
That's why he goes on Joe Rogan.
Doesn't even support one of the early rebels against the establishment. Yeah,
Didn't
it
support
tells me
one of the
everything.
early rebels.
Jesus rebelled against the establishment, Chris.
Oh,
and he got killed for it, rightly so.
I was like, wait,
according
are you
to
talking
Ben.
about somebody in American politics? I'm
No,
so
no,
confused.
no,
No, I
no,
understand now. I get
no.
it now. Okay,
Yeah,
good
Jesus
stuff.
was too anti-establishment for Ben. So
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
no, that whole thing is silly. But
That whole commentary. Let's put it this way: this book was less questionable to me until he did
prior to
that,
that,
and then
oh
I was like,
yeah,
yeah, I don't know how Christian. I'm not trying to judge how Christian somebody is, but like if your worldview involves layers of what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say, well, you're rejecting free will initially. Like free will is out there, and he's almost like antithetical to his own book because he says like virtue is only there when you can freely choose. If you're saying you can't freely choose to say Christ is king wherever you want, then that's not a virtuous world.
it came off paradoxical in a sense.
It doesn't make sense to me.
It was there's a bit of he wants to have his cake and eat it too. That's what I see with Klavan. That's my personal opinion.
I would agree with that. It's almost like he wants both his Jewish upbringing and his Christian conversion to be one thing.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
That's probably the paradox he lives. He wants his Jewish upbringing and he wants his Christian conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And he's probably like honestly, if I had to say anything,
he threads that needle. I think he tries to thread that needle too much.
And I'd say if you're the type of person who does it, pray for the guy. He probably could use it.
Yeah, because it's not really letting go of the previous beliefs per se. He's just trying to merge them together.
He is kind of,
and you can tell. I think you can tell in the part 3 of this.
I think his book shows how much he merges the two.
Yeah, I think so. It because it doesn't sit right with you when you read it. It comes off as something different than traditional Christianity.
Have
even
you seen
the Catholic or Protestant.
Have you seen the movie 50 First Dates?
Yeah.
She's got that VHS tape where she watches that to remind herself, this is my family, this is what I believe, Mm-hmm. It's almost like Klavan wrote this book so you can read it and be reminded, like, this is how I got to where I am. It's almost like a book for him.
Not completely wrong. So do we want to rate this thing?
I think, well, let me see I'm curious what I gave it on Goodreads. Let me see. Because I know I did rate this book.
I know you were pretty harsh to it. I thought you were a bit harsh to it when we discussed it in the past.
I gave it a 3.
I was willing to be more generous to it when I first read it.
But you've let it simmer and you're being less generous over time?
Yeah. Especially with...
In fact, I might actually lower it to a 2. I don't know. There's enough with the discussion of culture and books in there that I want to give it a 3. But his theology...
But I think it has bad... the bad theology is what bothers me. Just because I don't really want to endorse that.
I landed at a 3 because I like his discussion of culture and writing. But I can't stand his theology.
I would give it a 3. I was willing to give it a 4 when I first read it, but I don't think I can give it above a 3 as it's simmered.
Fair enough.
And it's also his perspective in general. Like, learning more about the author made his perspective in the book more apparent.
I would say this book does better if Andrew Klavan is not an internet personality, but I don't know how well it sells if he's not an internet personality. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Point. But I also feel like the book is false advertising, slightly.
The title alone is a bit, I would agree.
Just slightly. So it's like, I'm at a 3. Tops a 3. Someone could argue that it's a 2 if they really wanted to.
My Catholic perspective wants to give it a 2, but my
part 1 is a good discussion. Part 1 is a very good discussion. So
my critical author review wants to give him a 3. So
Yeah.
If I was just judging his theology, it'd be a 2. If it's judging the whole content of the book,
I don't know. The book as a whole is weak because of that last portion. It detracts from the first part. If he released just part 1, almost.
Or if he just expanded part 1.
If he just expanded part 1, I think it'd be a strong 4.
He is actually like a good. So if you want to get into some decent fiction, I think he's written some. I remember listening to him narrate some books years ago, and they were actually really interesting books. Yeah, he writes fiction, and I've heard it's from the stuff I've listened to, it was pretty good. So if you're gonna read something by Andrew Klavan, I just wouldn't pick this one.
Well, okay. Now I have to say, when you look at the back of this book and the praise it's received, Chris, this makes me want to rate it lower. So I'll read the first one. A stunningly original work, fascinating and informative. Not since reading C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce in college has a single book induced such deep and constructive theological reflection in me, as I suspect it will for many other readers.
So out of his books, this one is, let's see, 1, 2, 3.
Andrew Klavan has long since secured his spot as one of the most brilliant writers of our age. In the truth and beauty, Klavan's cultural insight and eloquence shine as never before. And that's your Catholic buddy, Michael Knowles. For those
well, to be fair, Mike, what year did this come out? 2022. Well, he also works for Daily Wire, so he's biased.
For those who love both Christ and great literature, as Andrew Klavan clearly does, this book is a delight and a means to that most important of things, the re-enchantment of our world.
Who wrote that? Was that Michael Knowles' review?
No, that's Carl R. Truman, professor of biblical and religious studies.
What did Michael Knowles say? I'm just curious what it is.
I already said.
Review. What? Repeat it though. I didn't hear you.
Andrew Klavan has long since secured his spot as one of the most brilliant writers of our age. In the truth and beauty, Klavan's cultural insight and eloquence shine as never before.
See, he said nothing about the theology either.
I know. There was one person who mentioned the theology.
Somebody rated it here, and this has a lot of upvotes on good.
Oh, do you want to hear what Ben Shapiro wrote?
Can I read this real quick? Let me intersperse before you do this. It says, I don't know that I've ever read a book that misrepresented itself so badly through the title and back cover synopsis.
Yep.
1 star.
Okay, do you want Ben Shapiro's review?
Go ahead, yeah.
Klavan is a magnificent writer, a person of wisdom, a man of compassion, all of which shine through here.
Here's another one for you.
What the hell? Wait, what the hell kind of review is that?
One that the Daily Wire can support and also Ben can support, I guess.
Yeah.
Here's one for you. This was rough. I almost wanted to give it 2 stars because I like the dreamy way he describes some of the romantic poets' lives at the beginning of the book. But it is so bad. Klavan seems like a stubborn, angry, narrow-minded, judgmental old man to me. Okay?
I wouldn't go that far.
This is a major disappointment, clearly false advertising if one expects the title and the inside jacket to give an accurate representation as to the premise of the book.
Well, what was the inside jacket saying again?
You got it.
Andrew Klavan believed what he read in the Gospels, but he often struggled to understand what Jesus really meant. So he began a journey of wrestling with the beautiful and often strange words of Jesus. He learned Greek in order to read the Gospels in their original language, and he vowed to set aside any preconceptions about what the scriptures say. But it wasn't until he began exploring how some of history's greatest writers wrestled with the same issues we confront today: political upheaval, rejection of social norms, growing disbelief in God, that he found a new way of understanding what Jesus meant. In The Truth and Beauty, Klavan combines a decades-long writing career with a lifetime of reading to discover a fresh understanding of the Gospels by reading the words of Jesus through the life and work of writers such as William Wordsworth and John Keats, Mary Shelley, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The English Romantics, Klavan encountered Jesus in a deeper and more profound way than ever before. For readers seeking to find renewed meaning in the words of Jesus, and for those who are striving for belief in a materialistic world, the Truth and Beauty offers an intimate account of one man's struggle to understand the Gospels in all their strangeness and so find his way to a life that is, as he says, the most creative, most joyful, and surely the most true. Yeah, that's a terrible inside cover.
Somebody wrote this: a decent resource for information and various insights about romantic poetry, but outlandish and terribly written as a critical work. I would strongly advise that if you're interested in this book for its advertised premise, do not read it.
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
think that is a good point. Like, I didn't think about that. This book is not advertised as what it is.
Yeah, that's valid. I'll still give it a 3.
I'll give it a
It was
3 as well.
interesting.
I think he was reaching for C.S. Lewis's like Mere Christianity or something like that with this book. And
Well, he marketed it as such.
And he didn't quite reach that. He didn't reach it. He just flat out didn't reach it. Like, it's not as good. It's not some magnum opus I would put on my desk as like, this is the greatest book this man ever wrote. I think his fiction is much better than whatever this was meant to be.
Yeah.
Plus, this title is super long. The Truth and Beauty, How the Lives and Works of England's Greatest Poets Point the Way to a Deeper Understanding of the Words of Jesus. That's a mouthful. No title of a book deserves to be that long.
No, that's valid. That's valid. That
Plus,
is.
It feels like he's muddling the words. Here's a better title for it: The Truth and the Beauty, Andrew Klavan's Understanding of Christianity and Romantic Poets. Anyway, what would you rename the book, Andrew? Maybe that should be our new subsection of this podcast, is if the book title is misleading, we rename it.
Rename it.
Yeah. Or subtitle it.
I would name it something along the lines of The Beauty Based on Truths.
The Beauty Based on Truths?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what if you don't agree with his truths?
I mean,
I would just change the subtitle. I think his subtitle is where the lies all occur.
Well, I would get rid of the subtitle. Fuck that shit.
Just call it Truth and Beauty?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, or I mean, you have to say that the reason those poems are so powerful, or so, well, those stories and everything are so powerful, it's considered so beautiful, is because they're speaking reoccurring truths, right? It's
well, then maybe you could call it this. Instead of calling it The Truth and the Beauty, blah blah blah, I call it Truth and the Beauty, one man's conversion through the poets of history or something. I don't know.
How about just say, yeah, The Truth and Beauty, read it to find out.
Christianity and Klavan.
We swear this book actually has words in it.
It does have that. And some of them are quite nice. I feel like in the beginning of the book, he's very powerfully, like, it's really good. And then he just loses me throughout the book.
I mean, part one, he keeps you.
Even some parts of part 2 are okay.
Yeah, part 3, he loses you. That's all I'm saying.
I feel like all of his theological discussion is just not necessary for this.
Yeah. No,
I would almost like him to write a second, or not a revision,
revise the book.
Just write about. So what enthralled me in this book was his discussion of English poetry over the years. And I think if he just wrote a book about that, I would probably read it and I would enjoy it and I would not be so bothered by his bad theology.
Mm.
How about you? Or are you just getting too tired?
I'm getting a bit tired because we've repeated it now. I can't repeat it anymore, Chris. Can't repeat it for
All
you.
right, Deus Vault. Anyways.
It's no, I honestly just drop part 3. I'm good with it if he drops part 3.
So on your copy, you're going to rip part 3 out and just keep the book.
I'll just try to stop reading.
You're going to rebind it. Rebind it. It's
Yeah.
part 3 missing.
Part 3, not useful.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyways,
So,
anything else?
The next book we review is what?
The Two Towers. A much better book than I thought going into it, because from what I remember,
better than I remember.
I couldn't finish it the first time I read it, but I really enjoyed it.
As I've gotten older,
I'm more willing to put up with slower things.
I'm more willing to appreciate the slowness of part 2. But that will be saved for the next episode.
Yeah, exactly. You can't make a film out of the truth and the beauty. I mean, you could try. I don't know what it would look like.
It would be a lame one.
You'd just be like following Andrew Klavan with a camera and him just repeating all the words he said on the book.
Okay.
Anyway, as always, I'm Chris.
And I'm Andrew.
And we will depress you with the next episode of
Printed and Pressed.
Printed and Depressed.
Bye, guys.
Bye.